Anybody else do something fun last night? My name is Congressman Greg Casar. I'm proud to represent the heart of Texas and to be chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. First, I want to say a few words about the passing of our friend, Representative Sylvester Turner. He was a dedicated public servant, both in the state capitol, in the mayor's office, and here in the halls of Congress. In addition to that, I really looked up to him in so many of my years. Before I ran for office, then as an office holder, I was proud to call him a friend, Congressman, or Mr. Mayor, as I called him even here in the Capitol. We will miss you, and our thoughts are with his family as well as with the people of his beloved city of Houston. Before we get to whatever it is that Donald Trump did last night, I want to quickly highlight two events earlier this week that I think tell you where it is we stand right now. First, on Monday, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, alongside our colleagues in the New Democratic Coalition, released a letter signed by virtually every House Democrat opposing any all cuts to Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. Then, on Tuesday, we heard from NRCC Chair Hudson the Republicans' new master plan for dealing with their constituents who are upset about proposed cuts to Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. The Republican plan was avoid talking to your constituents. That's where we began last night, with Democrats unified, protecting hardworking Americans, and Republicans on the run. And that's when we heard Donald Trump's speech, which I think was the best impression of one of these fake Republican attempts at talking to constituents that you could ever hear. We all know Donald Trump loves to talk, but he did everything he could to avoid talking about the fact that he is trying to cut Medicaid by hundreds of millions of dollars in order to hand that money over to his billionaire donors. Trump did everything he could to avoid talking about Elon Musk firing more veterans than anyone ever before and cutting veteran services. Donald Trump did everything he could to avoid talking about how the former head of Social Security says that Trump and Musk cuts may actually crash the entire service. The Congressional Progressive Caucus had a lot to say about those real issues facing Americans. CPC members showed our defiance and informed our community of what's really going on in Washington in a variety of ways. By boycotting, walking out, participating in counter-programming, giving our own response speeches. I encourage you to watch our member Latifah Simon's speech or Senator Sanders' remarks. And we held signs. Trump tried to duck the most important issues facing Americans today. But CPC members were determined to not let him change the subject from what is actually going on in Washington, D.C. Elon Musk is stealing from you. He is stealing from your health care. He is stealing veteran salaries. He is stealing your taxpayer money in order to pocket it himself. Trump and Musk are stealing from Medicaid. Therefore, we must save Medicaid. Trump and Musk are stealing from veterans. Therefore, we must protect our veterans. Last night, Trump lied, and the Progressive Caucus told the truth. So no matter what Donald Trump does to try to distract, as the CPC, we will communicate the truth to our constituents that Donald Trump and Elon Musk will lie to you every day of the week, but there are representatives in Washington, D.C. that are willing to tell the truth. And that is why we organized last week with our New Democratic Coalition colleagues to show a united front to protect these essential programs. That is why yesterday the Republicans announced their new strategy to start trying to avoid those town halls. And that is why today our job is to continue to go out to the American public and tell the truth. Donald Trump had the mic last night, but it is the American people who will have the last word on the Trump-Musk agenda. Next up, we have Congresswoman Delia Ramirez from the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Buenos días. Good morning, everyone. I am Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, and I get to represent the northwest side of Chicago and its northwestern suburbs in the 3rd Congressional District. In about 90 plus minutes of rambling on and on, Trump tried to convince us that he was ushering a new golden age and that he was reviving the American dream. But as you all heard, he talked and he lied and he spent a substantial amount, over 16 minutes collectively, blaming immigrants. And then he went on blaming our former President Biden, our world allies, our neighbors, our trans siblings, the left, and DEI, and the list goes on. And it became very clear for all of us who he was building a golden age for. Look, everyday working Americans are not part of Trump's bright golden future. The great and successful era that he seeks to usher in is only for the ultra wealthy and the privileged. How do I know that, you ask? Well, because his tariffs will make working people's lives more expensive. Because his tax breaks for the rich come at the expense of your Medicaid and your SNAP benefits. Because his budget savings require mass firings, and as you heard from Greg a moment ago, the largest number of federal terminations of veterans this nation has ever seen. Because his gold card, or what I would call millionaire gold card, is just a green card that mixed status families could never afford. Last night, I wore a shirt that said, "No king, no coup," in a chamber that felt, for many, frightening. I saw colleagues of mine to the right cheering on as a president talked about taking over countries, as a president talked about taking away what has made this America, this country, great. And in the face of an authoritarian agenda that serves only the ultra wealthy and privileged, we have a moral clarity. We have to have that moral clarity to fight for the policies that benefit working people. Let's start by making Donald and Elon, Jeff, and all those other billionaires pay their fair share. Then, frankly, let's get their money out of our elections. We got to get Elon out of our White House. We got to get Elon out of our agencies. And we got to get Elon out of our working people's pockets. And yes, we also need to increase the minimum wage. Folks, you heard this. We heard this talking to our constituents. Housing is a desperate need across the country. We have to invest in affordable housing and healthcare that is high quality and accessible, and comprehensive immigration reform. And to me, that's just the beginning. Because we have to protect our communities. We must defend our democracy. And we must collectively demand action in our streets and in Congress and in the courts that center working families. And so it means that we will use every legislative authority given to us, every oversight authority that we have, every hearing and every moment to ensure that we obstruct Trump's agenda of destroying our communities. Because we will not bow, we will not bend the knee, and we will not concede the power of the people. Let's get to work. With that, I'd like to introduce a leader that fights for our working families every single day when it's comfortable and popular and when it's not. Congressman Doggett.
Thank you, Delia. Thank you very much. Well, last night's speech demonstrated once again that Trump operates in a fact-free environment. Whenever he's called upon to justify some outlandish claim, he just makes things up. He relies on imaginary numbers, what some of his minions refer to as alternative facts, otherwise known as lies. Of the many lies that he told last night, one of the most troubling surrounded his attack on Social Security. You'll remember it as extended laughter and extended ridicule as he talked about Social Security paying out millions of dollars to people that were over 150 years old. This is the Social Security system that has delivered decade after decade, month after month, to provide life-sustaining support for seniors and for those with disabilities. And this attack accompanies Elon Musk's declaration this week that Social Security is just a Ponzi scheme. This extended attack on Social Security is based on a bold-faced lie. Trump knows, his staff knows, that Social Security is not paying out a dime to anyone who's over 115 years old. That's been true long since the Inspector General's report. Social Security makes payments to 72 million Americans each year, and less than 1% of the payments have ever been found to be improper. And those improper payments, they're not just overpayments or payments to a dead person. They include underpayments where Social Security failed to pay enough to some senior or individual with disabilities. The attack that he has also ignores the fact that the Republican indifference has caused the Social Security Administration to not be able to do its job as well as it could and should. Because between 2010 and today, Social Security, the administration's consumer budget has fallen 19%. Its staffing has been cut by 11%. And these cuts have happened despite the fact that we've called on the Social Security Administration to provide care to 13 million more people, or a 25% increase over that time. So what's the solution of Trump, Musk, other than denigrating Social Security? Well, they're going to cut Social Security Administration by another 7,000 people. And at the same time, they jeopardize Social Security with their soaring national debt. These great fiscal conservatives that can never afford a penny for a little more health care or a little more educational opportunity, they are going to add $4 trillion to our national debt even after they make all of these horrendous cuts. So together, they are trying to weaken public support, promote various myths about Social Security, and then set up a budget structure that will present us with a troubling situation where one day those Social Security checks will be marked by Republicans insufficient funds. We are going to stand up and fight back for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid and not let them do that. At this point, I will yield, I believe, to our colleague, Congresswoman Dexter from Portland, who is new to Congress, but who has extensive background in her work in healthcare, and we're very pleased to have her as a member of our caucus.
What an honor to be here, and what a concerning day for all of us. I am Congresswoman Maxine Dexter, as you just heard, from Oregon. I am a pulmonary and critical care physician, and most importantly, I'm a mother. Last night, I couldn't take the lying. I couldn't dignify that cruel nonsense with my presence. And so I walked out, and I walked out because we need to understand that this is a 5-alarm fire for our democracy. In public health, we have a way of saying that you're either too early or you're too late. You're never on time. But your goal is to take proactive action before it's too late. And that is what we need to do right now. We are at a moment where we have to step up to save our democracy. We only need 3 reasonable Republicans to find their courage, to stand up and not run from their constituents, but to take this moment and understand it for what it is and stand with us to save our democracy. Trump is stealing our health care, stealing from our veterans, and stealing from working people, who he only spoke of for a fraction of a very long speech last night. He is fundamentally remaking the fabric of our democracy for what it may remain. He's dismantling any checks and balances we may have. He is trying to favor the interests of billionaires and corporations, while working people and our most vulnerable communities are left with nothing. I will not let that happen, and the CPC will not stand silent. My community demands that I stand up alongside my fellow progressives. We will loudly fight back, we will relentlessly disrupt, and we will unapologetically resist. We cannot dignify his cruelty, and he needs to know that. We will keep up the pressure and keep doing more at every step, at every moment we can, to show Donald Trump for what he is, a liar and a threat to our democracy. Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. I have the pleasure of introducing an amazing champion for the working people, Congressman Garamendi from California.
I think we all need to take a deep breath and really come to understand what is happening here in the United States. 83 or more executive orders have been put forth by Trump. Many of these are simply to override the normal legal processes, the laws of America. These are decrees. Trump is governing by decrees, just as dictators all around the world have done. They ignore their constitution, they ignore their laws, and they take power themselves through either executive orders or decrees. You go down through the list of those decrees. We've talked about it here. Veterans. Moving veterans who actually, by law, have the first opportunity to take government jobs. Why? Because they've served the country. Because they've served the country honorably. And we want them to have an opportunity to continue to do so. But Trump has changed that. He's gone after the veterans. You take a look at the other decrees that he has put forward, and they deal with every aspect of the way in which the government of the United States has operated. He is using decrees to eliminate, not lawfully, but eliminate USAID. And the effect of that is found all around the world. He's using his power as president to change sides in Ukraine. We understand. Previous presidents have understood the necessity of standing up to Russia and understand that Ukraine is not the first effort of Putin to take over a country. He did it in Georgia. He did it in Crimea. And he continues to do it. And now we've seen the President of the United States change totally the position of the United States government from opposing that kind of power grab that Putin has put into play. And now we are in bed with Putin, and Ukraine is left behind. This is a fundamental shift, and we're going to find it in every way, domestically, as my colleagues here have pointed out, internationally, pulling back from the history. I was in government when Reagan stood in Berlin and said, "Take down this wall." Reagan understood. The presidents preceding Trump understood the threat of Russia and Putin, who is 25 years into his dictatorship. And here we are, with the President of the United States using some of the very same techniques that dictators have used around the world, and that is to govern with a decree, not in those decrees overriding the existing law or the constitution of those countries. And here it is in the United States. Beware. Beware of all that is happening. It is found domestically in the support programs that Americans depend upon, Medicaid, Medicare, and now Social Security coming down the line, and dozens of other programs that are essential for the operation of the United States and, more importantly, for the future of our people and for this planet. We're in a moment of extreme stress, and it is incumbent by all of us, whether it's the CPC or any other member of Congress, and I reach out to my Republican friends and said, you know better. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I've been around a long time, and I've seen presidents operating. My Republican colleagues have been there too, and they are frightened. They're frightened by Musk putting $100 million against any Republican that steps out of line. They're going to have to find their courage, because if they don't, then this will roll forward, and our democracy is imperiled. If we allow Trump to continue to operate by decree, each future decree will be even more significant. The good news is this morning, on a split decision, the Supreme Court held that the injunction that has been put in place with the pause that has been put in place against USAID dismantling can continue. So we have in our caucus a major support effort to the judiciary to do its piece. We must also do our piece. And I want to thank the CPC for putting forth this conference, giving us an opportunity to highlight what is actually happening. We're going to see this play out in the days ahead. One lie after another last night. It was hard to take that. But we made a decision to maintain the decorum. And we did, with one exception. And Al Green's going to do his thing, and we're thankful that he did. But the reality is, we're going to push back on this. We're not going to let this American democracy be ruled by decree by our own president. And the effect of that is felt across this nation, whether it's housing, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's health care, whether it's education. We're not going to allow, we're going to push back on each and every one of the dismantling of this nation's infrastructure, of this nation's programs. And most important of all, as we do that, we push back on the Trump effort to override our laws and to operate by fiat, by decree. Be happy. Greg, it's your podium.
Thank you, Congressman Garamendi, and thank you to all of our members. We're happy to take your questions now. I think our first question is from Jackie.
In terms, I know Representative Garamendi, you essentially alluded to it, but for the other representatives as well, in terms of the displays last night, whether it's the paddles or walking out, T-shirts, or Representative Green, was there a strategy behind that? Was it all planned? And then if Representative Green is censured, how would you all vote?
The press wanted a circus.
Millions of people were watching last night. And as Trump lied about his attacks on Social Security, lied about his attacks on Medicaid, lied about his attacks on veterans, Democrats were able to actually respect the American people by making sure we put forward the truth, by making sure that the American people understand that they have representatives in Washington, D.C. that are going to stand up for them, that are not going to just simply let this moment pass us by, but instead take very seriously that Trump and Musk's attacks on their lives are extremely alarming. And it is difficult to not sound alarmist when we are in such an alarming time. But I think Democrats showed their real respect for the truth and for the American people last night. And as it relates to Mr. Green, and I'm happy to also let people respond here in a moment. But as it relates to Mr. Green, he is a valued colleague. He is a Texas legend. We respect him greatly. And I believe that if you look at what happened during the State of the Union last year with Marjorie Taylor Greene, she was much more disrespectful than anybody has ever seen. Donald Trump disrespected our seniors last night. House Republicans are disrespecting our veterans and our communities. And so I think Mr. Green remains and has been a very valued colleague. And if you go to his native Houston and ask his constituents, they consider him a hero.
Let me just add about that. Al Green took an approach that's different from the one that I and a number of other people took. I think our approach was better to be there as fact checkers on a president who can't stop lying. He gets lost in his own lies. But any attempt to censure Al Green must be soundly rejected, and Republicans need to be reminded of the night I was present when Joe Wilson stood up and yelled, "You lie," to President Obama. And so it will be totally hypocritical, perhaps all too typical of Republicans, if they forget their silence when one of their members did something that was far more abrasive. Mr. Green left voluntarily, and it would be most inappropriate to take any action of that type against him.
And let me just add, what Donald Trump is trying to do is silence us. And I want to say to Al Green, I wish I would have stood with you. Thank you for your courage. We all knew we had to ensure that people knew that we were protesting in different ways as we confronted what I believe wholeheartedly, after looking into his eyes yesterday, a fascist. The idea of censoring Al Green is intentional silencing of dissent in a moment where, as my colleague, Congressman Dexter said, we are in an alarming emergency, that we have to do everything we can to prevent the loss of our democracy. And so, knowing their hypocrisy, knowing how they move, knowing the bully that stood in that podium, they will attempt to silence him, but we will not allow that to happen. And I want to make sure that I say it very loud and clear. Al Green did what he felt needed to be done, and we stand with him, and we will fight for him.
Nick.
I want to ask also about the protests last night. Heading into this, leadership urged members not to bring props, not to be disruptive, be solemn. What we saw last night from a lot of members was not quite that. Why go against leadership's wishes?
I think you need to get the line directly from leadership, because actually leadership was very clear heading right into the speech that their directive, their desire was for us to stay on message on Medicaid and the attacks on Medicaid, the attacks on our veterans, and the attacks on taxpayers that are getting their money stolen from them and being handed over to billionaires. And I believe the Progressive Caucus action last night with our signs fit very squarely within that guidance.
So I understand.
And sorry, and I've been calling people's names, but if you'll say your name and your outlet, we'll get back to protocol. I apologize.
My name is Andy Shea.
Yeah.
I'm with the Daily Caller News Foundation. So I understand that there were various different forms of protest last night, and lots of Democrats remained seated or held their applause during moments of recognition, like the brain cancer survivor or the West Point students' military acceptance. Do you think that that was the right decision in that moment? Should politics have been put aside for just a moment to recognize the positives of the night? What's your stance on those decisions?
I hope that everybody puts this very clearly. Every single Democrat has enormous respect for the American people and for cancer survivors. In fact, you have cancer survivors here in this room. What Democrats stand against is Elon Musk and Donald Trump ripping cancer research to shreds in order to give billionaire tax cuts, firing doctors and nurses who are caring for kids with cancer right now in order for them to take their salaries and put them in their own pockets. So every Democrat stands with enormous respect for the American people, whether they agree with us or not, and especially for those who are ill and struggling. And I think you saw that respect last night as we respected those Americans, but we do not respect Donald Trump and Elon Musk taking cancer treatment away from families.
Carl, Spectrum News. The Vice President is in your home state today touting what they're calling early success at the border. The President last night asked for more money for border and immigration. What does that look like to you guys? Should Congress deliver on that request?
Congress has repeatedly delivered more and more dollars to the border. Governor Greg Abbott has lit hundreds of millions of dollars on fire with his failed Operation Lone Star over the last few years. What people at home need to know is that while people like Greg Abbott and Donald Trump pour hundreds of millions of your dollars into performative stunts at the border, they at the very same time want to cut taxes for billionaires and cut your health care. So none of this is about immigration. None of this is really about the debt or the deficit or government efficiency. Everything that's going on, everything you saw in the speech last night was Donald Trump trying to distract from what the American people actually care about so that you don't notice his real agenda of taking away your health care and taking your taxpayer dollars for his billionaire friends and his corporate buddies. Okay. With that, we appreciate y'all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As if we had coordinated, it worked pretty well. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for pulling this together, Brian.
Very good responses.
Thank you.